Welcome everyone. Thank you so much for attending our session. This is a session on CEIPAL and TechServe Alliance, IT and Engineering Staffing Dashboard. We are really excited to be here today and for partnering with CEIPAL, who's just been a phenomenal partner, and we're really excited to show you the new IT and Engineering Staffing Dashboard. My name is Mark Roberts. I'm the CEO of TechServe Alliance, which is the National Trade Association for IT and Engineering Staffing and Solutions Companies. I am with Michele Clarke, who's CFO of TechServe Alliance and performs many other roles, including the key architect of the staffing dashboard. I think you're going to find it's a really cool tool. So with that, Michele, if you could advance the slide. So I kind of want to just take you through how we got here today. Just a little history of the research, of our research and benchmarking, enabling data-driven management. We're big believers that you don't do things merely by gut, but you do things using data and information. And that's really what distinguishes successful IT and engineering staffing firms from the also-rans. There's very little intellectual property in this industry, so it's all about execution, and data is the key to being successful. So let me just show you some of the data that historically we've produced. So we've been producing for over 15 years the IT and engineering employment indices. And the IT employment index basically captures all IT employment in the United States, engineering similar. And of course, it's been showing some pretty dramatic changes over the last number of months. As you'll notice, kind of coming into March, it was really flat, and that was a supply-driven phenomenon. And then it dropped and has dropped pretty markedly in the last number of months. Engineering has dropped, had a more significant drop, and then has come back a little bit. These, and we'll see on the next chart, that although it has dropped, when compared to the green line, which is actually all overall employment, it's a far more modest drop. Well, why do I show this to you? I think this kind of data is incredibly useful in terms of communicating with your clients. This is the kind of thing, if they're trying to push you on price or say, you know, there's so much unemployment, you should cut your rates by 10, 20%. This is the kind of data that you can use to kind of push back information. And so what we see here is, though IT employment is down about 3.95% year over year, it is far better, less than half of the decline of the overall workforce. If we look at unemployment rate, I don't have a slide right now, but it's information we can certainly get to you. IT is currently standing at about 3.3% versus a 13% unemployment rate for the overall workforce at the end of Q2. If you advance the next slide, sort of this is similar, just reflecting it as percentage terms. Again, data can be a very powerful selling tool in terms of communicating with your clients on more than just submitting a rec or trying to pitch them on a new piece of business. Next slide. So the other thing that we've done over the years has been the operating practice survey. And this is a deep dive into some of the key performance metrics in our industry. This shows revenue, and actually 2019, we just got our 2020 OPR report reflecting 2019 data, and it really shows it was a very strong year for firms in our sector. The green is growth within what we call typical firm or the median firm, and the blue are those outperformers, those top high-performing firms, what we call high-profit firms. And part of what we're about as an organization is showing folks how to get to that high-performing, to be in that high-performing group. Next slide. Other things we track are gross margin trends. You have to have just an absolute religious devotion to watching gross margin. And this again shows the difference between typical and high profit. Operating expenses, very critical in our industry. And we see obviously the typical firm has higher operating expenses. Well, this is critical, and I'll actually talk about it at noon on a session which has a little broader explanation of some of the resources that we offer. But this really shows a 2.2% difference. But this 2.2% of revenue in a low margin business, that's huge. And so one of the things that we've been focused on is trying to educate folks as to how to push down operating expenses. Profit before taxes. So this is the bottom line. And we've seen this historical trend. The historical ratio between typical firms and high profit firms is 2 to 3 times. High profit firms are 2 to 3 times more profitable at the bottom line. And then we even break it down to different types of business. Direct client relationships in terms of close rates, about a third, and this has been historically true, versus this year, only 2.6% median for VMS no contact business. And similarly with margins, very different margins between direct client relationship and VMS MSP business. Next slide. And then we show, break it down in terms of how much VMS versus retail business one has and the impact on profitability and growth. So a very critical number, and of course this relates to gross margin as well, is what are your direct costs? So how effective are you at managing those gross margins, and what's your SG&A payroll? That's everyone but your direct costs, all of your back office, your management, your sales, and your recruiting. And of course, high profit firms have a meaningful difference in terms of their SG&A payroll. Again, in a low margin business, that delta, that difference is huge in terms of driving profitability. And then we like to encapsulate all of this in what we call personnel productivity ratio. And that's basically how efficient an engine are you at generating gross profit dollars? And so when you look at typical versus high profit, lower is better. It's more efficient. You're spending less money in terms of your internal costs on payroll in terms of generating those gross profit dollars. The other thing that we track is on an individual salesperson basis. Not all salespeople are equal, and we see a huge difference among salespeople in terms of performance. So why do I share all of that with you, and why are we here today? Well, we have been really devoted to this concept of data-driven management and managing by metrics. And we are really pleased to put out the IT index and the engineering employment index on a monthly basis. The operating practice survey, which I showed you some benchmarking data, that is done on an annual basis. It's a really deep dive, answering literally hundreds of questions that you would have in terms of managing your business. But particularly in these times, it's ever more critical to manage on a month-by-month basis. It's not enough to take an annual look or even look at monthly employment numbers. How is the industry performing on a monthly basis? And some people do it informally. You call a couple of friends up who may be in the industry, and you ask them, hey, how are you doing? And you share how you're doing. But that's not a great way to have a sense. And as we saw dramatic changes happen in the beginning in March, modestly in March, because COVID really did not have its full impact really until April, it's ever more critical to know how you're doing against the industry. And this is the conversation that we started having with our friends at CEIPAL, and they had the same vision we had, which is this would be an enormous benefit to the industry of putting out this kind of information on a monthly basis. And so we envisioned this IT and engineering staffing dashboard. And we just closed our first survey. This is going to be done on a monthly basis. And the goal is to make it super simple. If you could advance to the next slide. We're just going to ask on the survey, for those that participate, you know this, but those that may be interested in participating in future months, what business are you in? IT, engineering, IT solutions, other? Where are your gross revenues coming from? Client industry. We know as a result of COVID that a significant part of how you're doing is which industry where your business concentration is by industry, your headcount. Advance to the next slide. And then we just want to ask some questions, the key metrics, key performance metrics that you should be tracking internally, not only overall, but also with each of your producers, both on sales and recruiting. And they're very simple questions. How many consultants on billing? New job orders, recs, candidate submissions to clients, client interviews, placements, starts, stops, and then a couple of questions about direct hire placements. And then, and I might add, that's only the first time you fill it out. In subsequent months, we think this takes 15 minutes at most. In subsequent months, it will take 5 minutes because we're only going to ask you. It will remember your data, and we'll only ask you that last month's question. The other thing that we want to track is we believe that technology is going to be a differentiator moving forward. And adopting emerging technologies is going to absolutely be critical to being successful. And so one of the things that we want to track over time is the adoption of various technologies, of mobile staffing apps, engagement, automation tools, chatbots, and so on. And so we're going to be measuring this for your firm as well as the industry overall. So let's look at some of the data. This is the very first look of any of this data, and we think it's super cool. So consultants on billing, obviously for anyone in our sector, a key metric. And as comes as no surprise, we see change in terms of a decline, and this is reflected as percentages, and then an improvement in May, coming off of obviously a deep dive in April. And then new job orders. We see this as a critical metric, and we think this is really, and we call it within the industry recs, new recs. This is a critical metric because it really presages the future, foretells the future. And with this tool and Michele's wonderful architecture, we are going to have some predictive analytic capability as we collect more data. So as you put in information on new job orders, it's going to be able to give us some insight in terms of what the future holds. So you can manage your staffing, your expenses. It's absolutely critical that you make sure that you have your expenses in line with potential business. Obviously, cutting too deeply can be a real problem if those opportunities exist and you don't have the talent to fill the demands of your clients, to meet the demands of your client. Likewise, if you're overstaffed, that's a problem too. Now, many of you have probably wisely retained staff even when you've slowed down if they were strong performers, and it's a balance. And one of the things that we're looking to do here is to ensure that we strike that right balance. So we think this new job order number is ever critical. And then, of course, the other key metrics, submissions, interviews, placements. It tells us so much. And why we think this is ever more critical is virtually everyone is still operating remotely. And managing by these metrics, managing your team by these metrics is critical. And you need to have a sense as to how are they performing? How are you performing against others within the industry? And we think this is going to be absolutely critical as you see the various the various lines in terms of what's happened. And of course, the good news is although we saw a low point for all of these things in April, no surprise, that was kind of the height of the lockdown. We see a return in May, and then we'll be collecting June and subsequently July in the near future. Then, of course, the other metric is starts and stops. Also very, very telling in our industry. As everyone knows, this is an industry where you can't stay in place. You have to keep adding because there are always people coming off billing. But there's been some interesting phenomenon I've heard anecdotally, and something that we hope to capture in terms of these metrics, that things like fill ratios have actually improved for a number of reasons. Some of the things I've heard is, of course, recruiters have fewer job orders to work on. and as a consequence, they're submitting higher quality submissions, and they're submitting maybe more submissions to a single client rather than maybe a single candidate. Maybe they're submitting 3 if they're allowed to do so. And so those are some of the things. And of course, there perhaps are some more higher quality candidates that have become available because of the COVID pandemic. So the big reveal, although we're going to do something even cooler at the end, which is Michele is going to take us to a live demo of our dashboard, co-presented with CEIPAL and TechServe Alliance. So this is what the dashboard is going to look like. It's going to really give you a bird's eye view, a picture of what's happening within your firm against what's happening in the industry. And then we're going to show it in terms of things that you could well understand, that funnel, in terms of submissions to ultimate placements. Again, how do you compare against the industry? How has the industry changed over time? How have you changed over time? These are all of the things that we're going to be capturing in terms of this new dashboard, IT and engineering staffing dashboard. The other thing, of course, like we showed on the prior slides, we're going to compare industry against individual firm performance, and this is just a sample of a made-up firm. This is not a particular firm, but a made-up firm of submissions, interviews, placements for this generic firm that we've actually combined a number of metrics to create, and then looking at starts and stops. So you're really going to have a picture of how things are performing. And then we're going to look at emerging technologies. We think that's absolutely critical for the future success of firms going forward. It is important now. It's going to be ever more important in the future. And then the other thing that we're going to also be doing is we're going to be asking you and your colleagues, what does the future look like? What does it look like next month and 3 months and 6 months? And we think those are kind of the reasonable time parameters in which to ask those questions. I think when you start going out further than 6 months, that's really guessing at that point. But this will give you a sense, and we're really encouraged by this because this shows a fair degree of optimism about things improving going forward. And so you get a sense of how others are looking at the industry and how things will be performing going forward. And this is just in terms of executive outlook, the percentage of increase, how dramatic they're seeing it over time. And then adoption of emerging technologies. We ask everything from not using to using extensively, and the varying emerging technologies. And again, this is something we're going to actually track. We think monthly is too frequent, so we're going to be doing it actually on a quarterly basis, and then sharing with you how you stack up against others.
Oh, sorry, wrong direction.
No problem. And then this is sort of the importance of emerging technologies over the next 12 months, according to our respondents. And so we're going to report on what that looks like in an aggregated number, single number. So now the big reveal, and I'm pleased to kind of turn it over to someone a little more technically capable than myself. Michele is going to try to show us a sample dashboard in real time. So Michele, take it away.
Awesome, thank you, Mark. So I'm just going to refresh this really quickly because I think part of what makes this tool exciting is watching that it is pulling data real time. So this is not a static web page that has been created and sent out to somebody. This is actually pulling data live in real time. Now, granted, we're only going to be collecting data from you as an individual firm once a month. So you're going to submit your data, we'll load it in, you'll get your updated dashboard. But as more of the other people in the industry complete their month survey, that benchmark data will start to update and change. So initially we'll throw it out there and show you, okay, here's where you compare to what was our closing numbers last month. Once we get enough critical mass to have what we call viable numbers, so you're not just comparing to yourself and maybe two other companies, but we have enough critical mass to issue that sort of industry benchmark data for the month. You'll get an email saying, hey, your dashboard's been up there from the day you submitted your information, but we've added now in the industry metrics so that you can see how you compare to your competition. Everything that we're doing here is just to walk you through kind of how it looks. And these are the key KPIs that we feel like everybody should be tracking every month. Consultants on billing. So it's going to show you the data that we just collected. We collected through the end of May. So we're going to be pushing out a June survey to everybody who participated to gather that information. But this information shows, in May, this particular company, and this is an aggregate of many companies to give us some real data, had 72 consultants on billing. That's up 5.9% from where they were in April, right? So this 5.9 is your percentage change month over month, but you can see where you were last month, where you were the month before. For the industry data, we're only showing percentage change, right? Because we're aggregating this data, taking the the median information, so that we're sort of factoring out the outliers, if you will, on the top and the bottom of the scale. And we're then providing you with what is the industry as a whole doing, up or down, for the month. So you can see consultants on billing, new job orders, starts, stops. So fill rate, if you're not familiar with fill rate, the calculation we use to get this is to take your current starts, so not your placements, but your current month starts, and we divide it by your end of last month's consultants on billing, or first of this month, which, it's the same thing, but we divide that out. That gets you your fill ratio. So this number, your actual fill ratio, 30% here, is what you did in May. April, you were at 15.9%. You're up 86.6%. The industry is actually down. So some people weren't doing as well as you were. So this would be an area where you're ahead of the industry. Stops, then stop rate. So stop rate, again, is the number of people that came off of billing, consultants that came off of billing during the month, divided by your total consultants on billing, okay, at the end of last month. So that's your stop rate. Oh, and I think I made a mistake earlier. Fill rate is actually starts divided by new job orders from the previous month. I think I said consultants on billing. That was a mistake. So its fill rate is starts divided by prior month new job orders, right? Because we know they don't all fill within the first month that you receive those orders. And then stops, again, is stops divided by consultants on billing at the beginning of the month. So you'll say, why is the down arrow green, which everybody asked me. I tried to make this visually a quick look to say, how are we doing? To me, green is good, even if it's down. So if your stop rate is down, that means that's good. If it's up, that's bad. So in this particular instance, the up arrow is actually the red arrow, and the green arrow is actually the down arrow. Same with stops, right? So I tried to make it visually appealing. If that confuses people later, we might change it, but we're going to throw this out there and then get feedback and get a sense from everybody what makes the most sense. Then we created this really cool sales funnel, and this is again based on the data.
Because the thing is, I'm on mute, but the thing is,
I'm sorry.
Go ahead, Michelle.
Oh, okay, sorry.
You're fine.
So placement funnel, it shows basically how how everything moves through that funnel, if you will, to get to the your conversion rate. And you can again see how you compare to the industry metrics, and these will be updated every month, right? As we gather more data, we'll be able to show you, we'll continue to expand these so that we're showing, month over month, quarter over quarter. Eventually, when we have 2 full quarters, we'll add a version of each of these slides that shows quarter over quarter. And once we've had this in the field for a year, we'll be able to show year over year data. You can actually start to see, how am I doing compared to how I was last year at this time, and how does that compare to the industry and at this same time last year or last quarter. So these are really exciting things. adoption of emerging technologies. This is really to help you gauge specifically how you're doing in terms of your competition, other IT and engineering staffing firms, in implementing new technologies. If you see that there's a specific area, let's say business process automation or your marketing automation, that you're not keeping up with the competition, eventually this may impact your ability to compete in this industry. And so this is to give you an insight into what should I be looking at, how should I be spending those resources, what should I focus on, what are the things that are going to keep me with a competitive advantage, if you will. So again, that's the way that it'll work. You'll submit your survey the very first time, as Mark said. You'll submit your full, kind of 6 months worth of data. And then from that point on, you'll only submit the key metrics for the contract staffing and direct hire and your future outlook. And then every quarter we'll do the emerging technologies. And what we'll do is we'll pull this data in, we'll create your version of this dashboard. We will share it with you, your link via email with a password that you'll use to access it. Important thing to note, whatever email address you put into the survey is who we're going to send that survey to. So don't use admin at or info at, because your whole staff might be able to see your metrics and data. You really should be providing someone on your management team's contact information for the survey. Occasionally, as we're analyzing the data, we find anomalies, and we'll reach out to whoever submitted that survey saying, this looks odd. Are you sure this is right? It's okay if it is, but we just want to make sure. We don't want to, aggregate your data into our greater survey pool if it's not accurate. So it is not just dump it in. We're actually going to be providing feedback to you. We'll be giving you information back from this. It is totally free to anyone to participate. You don't have to be a TechServe member to get this basic dashboard that we're providing here that I'm showing you on the screen, so that you'll be able to see how you're stacking up. So we really feel this is a service to the industry. And we've got a couple minutes left. I don't know, does anybody have any questions? Or Mark, do you have anything else you want to add?
No, great overview. We're really excited, and we think this tool is only going to get more valuable over time as we continue to collect data. So really encourage everyone to participate. We should have mentioned up front, there's no cost to participate. We're doing it as an industry service in conjunction with our partners at CEIPAL. Only TechServe Alliance, only Michele and those that have a need to know at TechServe Alliance have access to the data. So no vendors have access to data. No one else has access to the data. It's kept confidential. And we have a long history of doing benchmarking and surveying of this sort. So we really do think it's a huge benefit to the industry. Like Michele said, we're happy to take any questions now. If there's no questions, we're also happy to take questions afterwards. So with that, thank you again to our friends at CEIPAL. Michele, thank you for all your hard work in assembling this.